Okay. All right.
And the rabbi was very nice and he did not announce it so that anybody with a stroller could take their child home.
Yeah. Well, I didn't announce it because that's the halacha that some poskim say that if you know that people, a significant percentage of the people are going to have to carry anyway, so then it's better not to announce it.
You didn't find out that it was back up before Shabbos?
No, we didn't. Which community are you part of? Clanton? You already knew, huh?
You know what? It was very interesting. The rabbi did know. Unfortunately, I don't have anybody that goes to shul Friday night.
Oh.
So I saw that it was down, which not everybody saw, but by the time they posted that it was up, I really lit, so I didn't see it.
Yeah.
And I said, like, there should be some system where.
Well, yes, and the Eruv people, yeah, like a town crier, a non-Jew should have driven up to notify all of the communities. Anyway, I think some good lessons learned. So, okay, hi everybody. We're going to get started now, and let me wish you all in advance a happy Chanukah, Sameach, and may it be a time when every single Jew has the opportunity to rejoice with the safe return of the hostages and Chayalim back to their homes. So we're just going to spend a few minutes on the Kuzari. We completed page 476 2 weeks ago when Rabbi Yehuda Halevi basically revealed to us why he was delving so much in this very mystical book called Sefer Yetzirah, which is all about Jewish cosmogony, or how the origin of the universe came to be, how God created everything. And the Sefer Yetzirah explanation is that God utilized the letters of the Aleph Bet as the building blocks of the ingredients that went into creating our universe. And this is in contradistinction to the Greek philosophical depiction, which was so much in vogue at that time. And Rabbi Yehuda Levi's whole argument is, you don't need to resort to secular explanations of scientific theory of how the origins of the universe or other scientific explanation, because we have sufficient literature that's passed down to us in our own unique tradition that has equally valid explanations for these things. If anything, they're even more valid, because as he had concluded on page 476, he said, there's so much disagreement in the philosophical community about the details of that system, which is depicted among the philosophers, Aristotle, Plotinus, and all of the other great Greek philosophers. So if even they don't have consensus, they can't agree, then obviously there must be something flawed about that theory, and we'd therefore be better served looking at the Jewish approach that is found in the Book of Creation. Now, how well has this argument held water? Well, probably it hasn't. This argument has not withstood the test of time in the way that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi meant it. But the value of this discussion is that there may be two ways of looking at the origins of the universe. We're not prepared to say that Sefer Yetzirah is outdated. What we can say, however, is that when we look at current scientific theory and we look at the theory of the Big Bang and the origins of the universe, and scientists tell us that our universe is about 14 billion years old, and it started from one little cosmic egg. So many consistencies between the way that the Torah describes the origins of the universe and how modern science describes the origins of the universe. Where do the letters of the Aleph Bet come into play in current scientific theory? And the answer is that current scientific theory looks at gaugeable and measurable physics. And Sefer Yetzirah is talking about the metaphysics that is behind the physics. and what's going on in a completely different realm of reality, that God utilized the letters of the alphabet to create this Big Bang is all possible, just looking at it from a completely different perspective. So we shouldn't jettison Sefer Yetzirah just because we have a different theory of the origins of the universe, which doesn't have as much, let's say, controversy swirling around it as the early Greek philosophers did, but rather look at Sefer Yetzirah as a complement to the way we understand the origins of the universe from a completely physical standpoint. Okay, now we get to Rebbe Yehuda Halevi's sort of punchline, which is, this is all quite interesting if a person's interested in scientific inquiry. But is scientific inquiry even necessary? Does a Jew gain anything by delving into these topics in the first place? What's wrong with reading the first pasuk of the Torah, which says, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth, and shoin genik, which is French for that's enough, that's sufficient, right? Why do you need to have a clear understanding of the mechanics, how God created the world? Is that really important? Or cannot a Jew rely purely on tradition that is passed down to us? When God gave us the Torah, presumably, he gave us all the information that we needed in order to live our lives as good Jews. And if God only told us that in the beginning God created heaven and earth, maybe that's all we need. So that's really going to be the next approach of Rebbe Yehuda Halevi. The Kuzari says, and this is on the top of page 477, it's the 26th paragraph of essay number 4, and he says as follows: why do we need the explanations of the letters Hey, Vav, and Yud presented by Sefer Yetzirah, or angels and spheres presented by the philosophers, or any other explanations to explain how multiplicity emanated from a unique God? Let us simply acknowledge that everything occurs through God's will, that the universe was created ex nihilo, from absolute nothingness, and that God created all the diverse things in the universe simultaneously, each according to its kind, as recorded in the Torah's account of creation. He placed within each component the ability to subsist and reproduce. God constantly maintains them with his divine power, as we say in the liturgy. He renews in his goodness daily and perpetually the act of creation. God is constantly renewing and revitalizing all of creation. So isn't that enough? Do we really need to know more? So what is your response to that question? Before we see, this is the Khazar king asking the question, or Rabbi Yehuda Halevi depicting the Khazar king as asking this question. And really, before we get to the answer of the rabbi, let's talk about this for a moment. Is it important to delve into the philosophy and the science of the nature of the universe and how it came to exist? And let me ask an auxiliary question. Is there value in studying science and studying nature and having a better understanding of God's universe? Or is it okay to just stay in the Beit Midrash, to study Torah and imbibe all of the information that is contained in our holy books, and you don't need to know anymore? And that should be sufficient. So what is the correct approach? Yes, yes.
That with a lot of young people, and maybe this happens every generation, but I only have my own generation to think of. Kids are really smart, and I think they're even smarter than they used to be. But, like, maybe the new electronics are firing new areas in the brain. And they're not satisfied with straightforward answers about faith. And this is our tradition, and this is how it's explained, and we accept it and we live it, which for many people is enough of an incentive to continue the tradition. But they want more, and and especially when in the world of science, they want to reconcile science with our traditions. And it's not just young people. I find, I've read recently a book about someone who was very unhappy with his yeshiva upbringing and became completely atheistic or atheist. And he's a very, very intelligent person.
Mhm.
I don't think that in this individual who got these kinds of
Right.
explanations or reconciliations.
So Esther's taking the approach that for certain deep thinkers, taking things on faith based on what is written in our holy books is insufficient. But it's not really answering the question in the way that I phrased it. I agree with you. So for those people who are inquisitive, it may not be enough. But what about people who aren't inquisitive? Is it enough for them? In other words, I guess what I'm asking is the exploration of science, nature, and all secular knowledge, is that a concession to people who won't be satisfied with just studying our holy texts? Or in other words, if I could use the Beit Midrash terminology, is it a lechatchila or is it a b'diavad? Meaning, let me just explain what I mean. Is it preferred that a person pursue secular knowledge to help enhance and augment the traditions that are passed down to us? Or is that preferred, or is it only a concession to people who won't be satisfied with accepting things on faith? Go ahead, pass.
And I think it makes for a more robust understanding and even deeper appreciation, because person's faith is I don't want to say it's verified by science, because science changes. Science and medicine are changing all the time as new things are discovered, but it makes for a more robust, more colorful understanding. So I think it's an enhancement.
So Esther thinks it's chatchila, it's the preferred way to
Definitely.
go. What about people who don't have that inquisitive spirit like Esther Huberman, and are perfectly happy accepting things on faith, and are concerned that their pursuits in the secular arena may erode their faith? Is there validity in that approach?
Well and healthy, feel good about their faith, and
But there are a lot of people that do feel that way.
Yeah.
Other people, they
vicious
are
slippery slope.
they live in that community.
Right. In other words, we are clearly aware of whole communities that are sequestered from external knowledge, deliberately so, out of a concern that their faith may be challenged should they encounter certain things that are being bandied about in the secular world as far as different ideas. So your response, I want to probe a little bit further, if I could, Esther. Your response is God bless them. So what do you mean by that?
It's not, we're obviously not all the same. And I think in one of your classes that I attended in this class, we talked about different people's abilities to assimilate whatever it is they're being told or they're learning. People have different levels of internalizing their lessons, their lives, how they interpret the world. And I'm not here to judge who's the better way. It's kind of like Sephardi and Ashkenazi and Mizrahi.
Right,
You can't say which one of those is right.
right. So you're saying different strokes for different folks. There are people whose minds or whose brains are wired a certain way, where for them it might be better for them not to go down the rabbit's hole of scientific inquiry. But there are other people who, for them, it would be a tremendous waste for it to be imposed upon them that they should not inquire because their minds are by nature inquisitive. And for them, they could get suffocated by living in such a community where the prevailing don't bother pursuing these things. But it could be equally treacherous for a person whose mind doesn't function that way. Like there are certain people I know I'm very close with, they're not wired the same way to be inquisitive. They would rather take things on faith and don't have the same interest in scientific inquiry. And as a result, it would be better for them to just read the psukim, withdraw, read Tehillim, be pious, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to leave it here because there's a lot in the Parsha that I want in Chanukah that I'd like to discuss for today. But let's remember that this is an important conversation. I'm going to let you know that for Rebbe Yehuda Halevi, this is a huge divide between Rebbe Yehuda Halevi and the Rambam. For Rebbe Yehuda Halevi, scientific inquiry is a b'diavad. It's only if you need it. For people who are of true, pure heart, they would be better off just accepting the words of the Torah as gospel, if you'll forgive the metaphor, and not having to delve into these other areas of knowledge because they could be misled by them. The Rambam is exactly the opposite and says that not only is scientific inquiry a lichatchila, the preferred way to go, but I'll show you a text that'll blow your socks off, that for the Rambam, if you stop at only Torah study and do not further your inquiry beyond that, then you're on a very low level of closeness to God, which is like really shocking. Think about it. Okay, so we're going to see these two attitudes unfold before us in the next couple of discussions that we have on the Kuzari. This is very important stuff, and we'll talk about it. So let's move on. Let's shift gears to our Parsha, because I want to share something really interesting with you about a particular minor character in the biblical narrative in Parshas Miketz, but a nonetheless very important person. Her name is Asenath. Who, of course, is Asenath? Can anyone tell me who she was?
No.
Anyone want to share their ideas? What's that? Was she the daughter of Dinah? That's a question if she was the daughter of Dinah. But who is she identified as is in the Chumash?
Wife of Yosef?
The wife of Yosef. Exactly, the wife of Yosef. And but
Asenath, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Let's if I could just ask everyone to mute unless you'd like to speak here. I'm just going to mute everyone. There we go. Okay, and then just unmute yourselves when you'd like to either raise a question or a point. Okay, I want to share with you the psukim first, and then we're going to go into it. Vayikra Pharaoh Shem Yosef Tzofenat Paneach. That Paro called Yosef Tzofenat Paneach, which is he's a seer, he's a gazer, and he's able to interpret things properly. It has a lot of connotation. Vayiten lo et Asenath bat Potifera Kohen only Isha. And he gives him Asenath, the daughter of Potifera, could be Potiphar with a Ra at the end. Ra is the sun god, as a wife. Vayetze Yosef al Eretz Mitzrayim, and Yosef goes out upon the land of Egypt. In other words, he's sent out by Paro. The Yosef ben Shloshim Shana be'omdo lifnei Paro melech Mitzrayim. Yosef was 30 years at the time when he's standing in front of Paro and given this new moniker, Vayetze Yosef milifnei Pharaoh, Vaya'avor b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. Seemingly completely redundant. Yosef goes out from Paro's presence and passes through the entire land of Egypt. Notice the redundancy. The previous verse had also said, Vayetze Yosef al Eretz Mitzrayim, in a more compact way. And here, it's Vayetze Yosef milifnei Paro. Yosef leaves Paro's presence and goes out and passes through all of Egypt. Why do you need both phrases? Seems to be completely redundant. Next. Just a few verses later, starting with Pasuk Nun, verse 50, Uli Yosef yulad shnei vanim b'terem tavo shanat ha'ra'av. Yosef is, two sons are born to Yosef before the 2 years of famine arrive. Asher yaladalo Asenath bat Potifera Kohen Hinaon, who was birthed to him or for him by his wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potifera, the Kohen of On. Now, why? We already know who he's married to. Why does the Torah have to repeat her full name and her lineage again in this verse? At least just say Asher Yoladolo Asenath, period. We already know who Asenath is. Vayikra Yosef et Shem HaBechor Menashe, Ki Nashani Elokim et Kol Amali ve'et Kol Beit Avi. He called his older son Menashe, because God has caused me to forget all of my travail and all of my father's home, all of my suffering, he means to say, from my father's home. Ve'et Shem Hasheni Kara Ephraim, the second son he calls Ephraim, from the word lahafrot, which is to be fruitful, ki hifrani Elokim be'eretz oni, because God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my poverty. So Nashani is the source for Menashe. The word lenashot is to forget, and lahafrot is to be fruitful. So the first son represents Yosef severing the painful past from his memory, and Ephraim represents the optimistic future of being fruitful and being able to be productive. Fantastic. So I just want to talk a little bit about Asenath, and I just want to point out that a lot of what I'm going to be presenting to you is based on an article from 1924, exactly 100 years ago. There was a Yid by the name of Avigdor Aptowitzer, and he wrote an article, a scholarly article called Asenath, the Wife of Joseph, a Haggadic Literary Historical Study. It was published by the Hebrew Union College Annual, Volume 1, okay? Now, Hebrew Union College, of course, is a Reform seminary, so you might think, well, this is a treif source, right? But it turns out that Avigdor Aptowitzer was a frum Yid. He was born to a very Hasidic home from the Chanukah Hasidic dynasty. He later made Aliyah and was a Mizrahi, a religious Zionist Jew. And it's interesting that before he passed away, you can read more about him in his Wikipedia entry if anyone's interested. It seems to be like one of these really fascinating people who got maybe caught up a little bit in the Haskalah, in the Enlightenment period and scholarship and academia, but at the same time didn't want to let go of his frumkeit. It's not really clear. I don't have a full biography. It probably would be interesting to trace him and where he comes from and what paths he took in his lifetime. Before he died, he told his children to burn any of his unpublished writings. I don't know why. Perhaps maybe he may have had some remorse of certain pathways that he may have traveled down over the course of his lifetime. We really some of his ideologies, maybe he recanted or something. We don't really know. But anyway, he's a very interesting person. So he writes this scholarly article where he traces 3 different approaches to who this Asenath was, based on traditional sources. The first source is a medrash that is cited by Rabbeinu Bechaya. Va'amru b'midrash, and this is what Rachel had said a moment ago, ki Asenath bat Dina haita mishechem ben Chamor, that Asenath was the daughter of Dina, who was raped by Shechem ben Chamor, and she got pregnant, and this was the product of their union. Ulefi shegirsha Yaakov or shegarsha Yaakov mi beito v'hoshiva betoch seneh echad lekach nikreit Asenath. Why was she called Asenath? From the word seneh. What is a seneh? It's a bush. Apparently, according to this midrash, Yaakov ejected her from his house because he felt that she was the product of an illegitimate union. He didn't want to have anything to do with her. So he basically left her at the door, you leave her at the doorstep of a convent or something. He put her in a bush where someone would find her because he didn't want to raise this girl. He felt it was a tremendous humiliation to the family. Now, of course, we're not here to judge what people did in the old days when there were illegitimate children, but I guess Ma'asa Yaakov, Kashala Kitav B'Tzavara V'Chatuv Bo. What Yaakov did is that he took an amulet and put it around her neck, this young lady, or this girl, baby, however old she was. And in the amulet, it was written, Kol HaMedabek Beich Medabek Bizaro Shel Yaakov. Anyone who attaches himself to you is attaching himself to the descendants of Yaakov. Now, so clearly there's some kind of ambiguity here. If she's the source of all of this humiliation, why would Yaakov leave his name around the neck of this girl? So it could be there's some ambivalence. He has compassion for her, doesn't want to lose connection with her, but at the same time feels he cannot raise her in his home for whatever reasons. Maybe it has to do with the sanctity of his home. It's not really clear from the Midrash. But Asenath, according to this tradition, is Yosef's niece, right? Is Yosef's niece. Now, in Jewish law, there's no problem to marry your niece. You know that, right? But this is, of course, before the Torah was given, so anything would have gone, even if it was his sister, theoretically. The Yosef shenesa'a ra'a haketav hahu v'hitznio. Yosef found this amulet, and of course, Rabbeinu Bechaya doesn't give you the full story. Rashi actually fills in the blanks because Rashi cites this midrash as well later on in Parshat Vayechi, that when Yosef was taken out for people to see him for the first time as the great dream interpreter and the one who was going to bring economic prosperity to Egypt, is paraded around the capital of Egypt, and all of the women see him and they fall into a swoon, is the way it's described in the Midrash. And everyone is throwing something at him to get his attention. Look at me, look at me. Asenath doesn't have anything to throw at him, so she pulls off her amulet and throws it at Yosef, and it hits him, and he picks it up, and he realizes that the girl who threw this is his niece. And that's why he's able to, and he hid it away, and until it would be opportune for him to marry her. V'hu sha'amar la'aviv, and that's why he said to his father later on in the Torah, Banai heim asher natan li Elokim bazeh, that Yosef says to his father, you see these two children, Ephraim and Menashe, you, father, may be worried that they're not Jewish children or that they don't come from good lineage, but they are my children that God granted to me, bazeh, with this. What does with this mean? He pulled out the amulet and showed it to his father. And he said, you see this amulet? It's got your name on it. That's the girl that I married, and these are her children. Heralo haktav hazeh. So the question then becomes, why then does the Torah call her the daughter of Potiphera if she's really the daughter of Dinah? And the answer is, mitnei shegadla beveito, because Potiphera adopted Asenath, raised her as his own daughter. Shekain darshu razal, as our sages tell us in the Talmud in Sanhedrin, kol hamegadel yatom b'toch beito, anyone who raises an orphan in their home, ma'ale alav hakatuv ki'ilu yelado. Scripture gives them credit as if they had given birth to that child. which is the whole concept of why adoption is something that is extolled in Jewish thought. Many people think that adoption, not too long ago, I got a call from somebody who wanted to discuss the possibility of adopting a child. And they told me that a rabbi had advised them against it. And I said, on what grounds? He says, because, he's been around and he's seen that sometimes adoptions don't go that well. The children may have some genetic issues or some residual issues from their parents, and it may end up creating a disruption in the home, and you're not sure if you want to do it. I said, there may be truth in that, but my tradition is that, especially when a couple is not blessed with children, adoption may be the right way to go, because it gives you an opportunity to actualize the parental instincts that God gave you, to be able to care for someone who is reliant upon you, dependent upon you, and it only enhances you as a human being if you have the zechut to be able to parent someone. And it's as if you gave birth to them, as scripture says. So different approaches, but anyway, there you see it. So that's the first approach, is that Asenath was none other than the daughter of Dinah. So she's a fine Jewish girl. Through miraculous means, she makes her way down to Egypt. And that's the first opinion. Yalkut Shimoni is another midrash that brings down a different approach. And the approach is that she is really the daughter of Potiphar, and the daughter of Eshet Potiphar. Okay, and she's witness to everything that was going on in the house. Now, we're coming into the middle of the story, but you all know how the wife of Potiphar tried to seduce Yosef. And Yosef resisted her advances and said, I'm not interested. And we know that from the Torah's narrative that she grabbed his clothes, he wiggles out of the clothes and runs away. Oto hayom, now we come into this midrashic interlude. Oto hayom halchu kulam la'avodah zara, v'hi aseta atzma chola. So she was very distraught. So everyone went to church that day, and she pretended that she was ill, and she stayed home. She didn't want to face anybody. She was humiliated. Kevan shechazru halchu chavroteh levakra. As people left church, her friends, noticing that she wasn't in church that day, came to visit her. I use church in the vernacular, but it was some kind of Egyptian shrine, okay? Amrullah malach shepanayich kach. So they said to her, whatever her name was, why are you look like, you look geschmettered, like you look so sad. What's going on? So sipra lahen kol hameora. So she told him everything that happened. This handsome slave I wanted to consort with, and he refused. Amrullah eich ein lach takana. So they said to her, listen, there's only going to be one way you can fix this problem. As humiliated as you are, and how are you going to face this Yosef now? Are you going to Ela emor leba'alech kach v'kach v'yichbashenu b'veita asurim. Tell your husband that he tried to rape you, and they will put him in prison. Amr lahen b'vakasha miken shetomarna kol echat ve'achat leba'alechen she'af lachen tava ve'asuken. So she said, it's a good strategy. Do me a favor. You tell your husbands that Yosef tried to do the same to you. And that's what they did. She wanted to build a really strong case against Yosef, that he was this philanderer, this very lustful young man. And she got all her friends to do the same thing. So all of the dignitaries, hearing their wives' reports, came very angrily into Potiphar's home, Visiprulo, and they told him everything that they had heard. Ratza lahargo, Potiphar wanted to execute Yosef right then and there. Amrale al tahargenu v'tovad ma'otecha ela tach b'shenu. So his wife said to him, no, don't kill him. It's a waste of money. You spend so much money on this slave. Don't kill him. Just have him imprisoned, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. Afilu kain ratza lahargo, and nonetheless, Potiphar wanted to kill this kid. He said, why should I listen to you? What's the point of keeping him in jail? Ad Shabbat Osnat Beseter El Potifera. And that's when Asenath came secretly to her father, V'nishba'alo v'sipra ha'emet. And she said, Father, I want to swear to you that everything I'm going to tell you is the truth. And she told him the truth. Yosef did not make any advances to mom. Mom was the one who was trying to seduce Yosef. Now, that's a very hard thing for a daughter to have to say about her mother, right? But she did. Okay? Amar la HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So once she did that, God said to Asenath, whether or not she could hear it or not, but God said to her, Chayech ho'il va'at lomedet alav zuchut. I swear to you that because you have defended Yosef, Shivatim shani ma'amid mimenu al yadechem ba'im, that the tribes that will emerge from Yosef, namely Ephraim and Manasseh, will come through you. That was your reward for being truthful and defending Yosef, even though it meant condemning your own mother. Okay, so we have two versions now. Version number one is Asenath is the adopted daughter. Version number two, and the reason why Yosef marries her is because she's from his family, she's his niece. Version number two is Asenath is truly Potiphar's daughter. And the reason why she's chosen to marry Yosef is because she is a virtuous person. And now we have version number three. And this is where we get Aptowitzer's input, because I never would have found this otherwise. There is something called the Apocrypha, which is just what in Hebrew called Sfarim Chitzonim. The Apocrypha are ancient texts that were written around the same time as the Tanakh, certain books of the Tanakh, but were not incorporated into the Tanakh. Different Christian sects, different sects of Catholicism have incorporated certain books of the Apocrypha into their holy scriptures, but we only have 24 books. Everything else that was written and was known at the time when the Tanakh was written is called the Apocrypha. Now, there's a subset of the Apocrypha called the Pseudepigrapha, which are texts that are where the authorship is deliberately left anonymous. And one of those books is called the Story of Asenath, or it's also called Joseph and Asenath. And it is one of these very stylized depictions. It was written somewhere between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE, written during that period. So it's really either post-biblical or just at the very end of the biblical period when this story was written. And it's unclear what its origins are. Aptowitzer opines that it was originally written in Hebrew, but there's no conclusive evidence of that. And if you want to learn more about the history of it, you have the links that you can use to research it. It's a very long text, so we're just going to read a few excerpts of the text. It came to pass in the first year of the 7 years of plenty. It's almost like a midrash, right? But the only thing that we're not sure of, does it come from a legitimate source or not? So I just want to give that disclaimer. Because it's a pseudepigrapha, we don't know if it comes from the rabbinic community, whether it comes from a Sadducee community, a Christian community, and whether it was doctored over the centuries and other texts were added into it. Because it does have certain references that make it sound almost Christological in certain parts of the text. So we have to read it with a discriminating eye. It came to pass in the first year of the 7 years of plenty, in the 2nd month, that Pharaoh sent out Joseph to go round the whole land of Egypt. And Joseph came in the 4th month of the 1st year, on the 18th day of the month, into the district of Heliopolis. Doesn't sound very Egyptian. It sounds more Greek, right? So obviously we're dealing with a text that is looking back and imposing its history on the ancient world. And he was collecting all the corn of that land as the sand of the sea. Now there was in that city a man, a satrap of Paro, and this man was the chief of all of Paro's satraps and lords. And he was very rich and wise and generous, and he was Paro's counselor. And his name was Pentephres. I guess that's maybe one way of translating Potiphar. And he was the priest of Heliopolis of On. And Pentephres had a virgin daughter of about 18 years of age, tall and beautiful and graceful, more beautiful than any other virgin in the land. And she was quite unlike the daughters of the Egyptians, but in every respect like the daughters of the Hebrews. And she was as tall as Sarah, and as beautiful as Rebekah, and as fair as Rachel. And this virgin's name was Asenath. And the fame of her beauty spread through all that land, even to its remotest corners. And all the sons of the lords and of the satraps and of the kings sought her hand in marriage, young men, all of them. And there was great rivalry between them because of her, and they began to fight among themselves because of Asenath. And Paro's eldest son heard about her, and he begged his father to give her to him as his wife. And he said to him, "Give me Asenath, the daughter of Pentephres, the priest of Heliopolis, as my wife." And his father Paro said to him, "Why should you want a wife of lower station than yourself? Are you not king of all the earth? No, see now, the daughter of King Yoakim is betrothed to you, and she is a queen and very beautiful indeed. Take her as your wife." We have no idea who King Yoakim is. Who could that possibly be? Now, there was a king in Israel called Jehoiakim, but it's ahistorical, because if this is taking place in the times of Yosef, then King Jehoiakim would not exist for centuries hence, okay? So clearly a very ambiguous text, a very unclear text. Chapter 2, now Asenath despised all men and regarded them with contempt. Yet no man had ever seen her, for Pentephres had a tower in his house, and it was large and very high. And the text goes on to depict Asenath as being very arrogant, very, very aware of her own beauty, and she felt that all men were beneath her, and so forth and so on. Okay? Chapter 3. In today's world, we don't know what would have happened to her, but anyway, let's go on. And it came to pass in the 4th month, on the 18th day of the month, that Yosef came into the district of Heliopolis. And as he approached the city, Joseph sent 12 men in front of him to Pentephres, the priest of Heliopolis, saying, "May I be your guest today, for it is near noon and time for a midday meal. The sun's heat is overpowering, and I would enjoy some refreshment under your roof." When Pentephres heard this, he was overjoyed and said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Joseph." And Pentephres called his steward and said to him, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, you meet Asenath. She comes down the stairs when Yosef is in the house, and she hurried and came down by the staircase from her story at the top, and she came to her father and mother and greeted them. And it gave Pentephres and his wife great joy to see their daughter Asenath adorned as the bride of God, and they took all of the good things they had brought from their estate in the country, and they gave them to their daughter. And Pentephres said to her, "See, Joseph, the mighty man of God, is coming to us today, and he is ruler of all the land of Egypt. For Paro had appointed him ruler of all our land, and he's the distributor of corn throughout the country, and is to save it from the famine that has come upon it. And Joseph is a man that worships God. He is discriminating, and a virgin as you are today, and a man of great wisdom and knowledge, and the Spirit of God is upon him, and the grace of the Lord is with him. So come, my child, and I will give you to him as his wife. You shall be his bride, and he shall be your bridegroom forever." And when Asenath heard what her father said, a great red sweat came over her, and she was furious and looked sideways at her father. And she said, "Why should my lord and my father speak like this and talk as if he would hand me over like a prisoner to a man of another race, a man who was a fugitive and who was sold as a slave? Is this not the shepherd's son from the land of Canaan, and he was abandoned by him? Is this not the man who was accused of committing adultery with Potiphar's wife? Why would you want to set me up with this riffraff?" And it goes on and on and on. We skip to chapter 6, and Asenath saw Yosef, and she was cut to the quick, meaning that she actually looks upon Yosef for the first time, realizes that he's a holy man, and that she feels terrible that she's maligned him so. Her stomach turned over, her knees became limp, and her whole body trembled. I think that's what my wife told me she felt when she saw me for the first time. And she was much afraid and cried out and said, "Where shall I go, and where can I hide myself from him? And how will Joseph, the son of God, regard me?" See the Christological reference. "For I have spoken evil of him. Where can I flee and hide myself? For he sees everything, and no secret is safe with him, because of the great light that is in him. And now may Joseph's God be propitious to me, because I spoke evil in ignorance." Chapter 8. We're skipping like whole sections. And it's like 22 chapters, the book. And Asenath's, I just have a little bit more text and then we're going to be done. And Asenath's mother went up to the top story and brought Asenath down to Yosef. And Pentefri said to his daughter Asenath, greet your brother, for he too is a virgin as you are today, and he detests all strange women just as you detest strange men. And Asenath said to Joseph, may you have joy, my lord, blessed as you are of God Most High. And Joseph said to her, may God who has given all things life bless you. And Joseph saw her, and his heart went out to her, for Joseph was tenderhearted and compassionate and feared the Lord. And he lifted up his right hand above her head and said, O Lord, the God of my father Israel, the Most High, the Mighty One, who didst quicken all things and didst call them from darkness into light, and from error into truth, and from death into life. Do thou, O Lord, thyself quicken and bless this virgin, and renew her by thy spirit, and remold her by thy secret hand, and quicken her with thy life, and may she eat the bread of thy life, and may she drink the cup of thy blessing. Again, Christological references. She whom thou didst choose before she was begotten, and may she enter into thy rest, which thou hast prepared for thine elect. Chapter 9, and Asenath was filled with joy at Joseph's blessing, and went up in haste to her story at the top, and fell on her couch exhausted, because she felt not only happy, but also disturbed and very frightened. And she had been bathed in perspiration from the moment she heard Joseph speaking to her in the name of God Most High. And she wept bitterly, and she repented of her God she used to worship, and she waited for evening to come, etc., etc. Chapter 11, and it came to pass on the 8th day that Asenath looked up from the floor where she was lying, for she was losing the use of her limbs as a result of her great affliction. Chapter 14, and as Asenath finished her confession to the Lord, that goes on for verses and verses telling us of her tshuva, her confession, how horrible she feels about having spoken ill of Yosef. The morning star rose in the eastern sky, and Asenath saw it and rejoiced and said, the Lord God has indeed heard me, for this star is a messenger and herald of the light of the great day. And lo, the heaven was torn open near the morning star, and an indescribable light appeared. And Asenath fell on her face upon the ashes, and there came to her a man from heaven, and stood at her head, and he called to her Asenath. So she's visited by an angel, and the angel has a conversation with her. Chapter 15, and when the man had finished speaking, Asenath was overjoyed, and she fell at his feet and said to him, blessed be the Lord God that sent you out to deliver me from the darkness and bring me into the light. Blessed be his name forever. We get to the end of the story, chapter 21, and Joseph got up early in the morning. I've skipped all the part where Paro's son becomes crazed with jealousy that Yosef is marrying Asenath, and he tries to go out and do battle with Joseph and tries to create all of these. Anyway, it's a fascinating read. If you're interested, you can go read the original text. It's online. Anyway, Joseph got up early in the morning, and he sent away to Paro and told him about Asenath. And Paro sent and called Pentefres and Asenath, and Paro was astonished at her beauty and said, the Lord will bless you, even the God of Joseph, who has chosen you to be his bride, for he is the firstborn son of God, and you will be called daughter of the Most High, and Joseph shall be your bridegroom forever. And Paro took golden crowns and put them on their heads and said, God Most High will bless you and prosper your family forever. And Paro turned them towards each other, and they kissed each other. And Paro celebrated their wedding with a banquet and much merrymaking for 7 days. And he invited all the chief men in the land of Egypt. And he issued a proclamation saying, any man who does any work during the 7 days of Joseph and Asenath's wedding shall die. And they, of course, the story goes on. They have children, and their names are Ephraim and Manasseh, and they live happily ever after in the castle. Okay, so very, very fanciful story, of course. And so the question really is, what do we make of this? This is the third version of who Asenath was. Very unclear as to what the origins of this story are, but she is this very, very righteous girl who originally spurns the prospect of marrying a Hebrew. And then when she sees him and realizes how holy of a man he is, turns away from all of her idolatry, cleaves herself unto the Lord of Israel, and becomes like a Gioret, I guess you could say. And it's based on that the shidduch is made and Yosef is able to marry her. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that I think we're supposed to take from the text itself. And really the key is why the Torah tells us that Vayetze Yosef, that Yosef leaves and goes out into Egypt twice. And that really is going to be sort of like the basis of where I want to build from. You see, Yosef has two objectives. One is the external objective, and the other one is the internal objective. The external objective is that Yosef knows that in order to succeed in his internal or his covert mission, he needs to integrate and assimilate with Egyptian society. And he needs to go out into Egypt and become one of the people in order to convince Egypt that he is their leader, and in order to convince them to go according to his plan to contribute, conserve some of their grain and contribute it to the government coffers so that there will be what to distribute during the years of famine, okay? Paro, in his attempt to rehabilitate Yosef and to make sure that he would be accepted as the leader, wants him to become as Egyptian as possible. And so he gives him a wife who is the daughter of one of the priests. And the word Ra, is the sun god. And so there's a very deliberate attempt to Egyptify Yosef and make him as, part of the religious community. He marries the priest's daughter, and to make him as even more Egyptian than Egyptians. They say like the Jews who assimilated in Germany became more German than the Germans. And that was the great irony, is that no matter how German you were, you were still a Jew in their eyes, and you could never out-German a German, okay? But Yosef knows that this is only the external objective. The internal objective is to create the proper environment for his family of Jews to incubate in Egypt, so that when they are ready to leave, they will be able to become the Jewish nation and receive the Torah. And what the Torah here is presenting us with is, in a sense, a blueprint of how a Jew is supposed to thrive in the diaspora in a healthy way, integrating with the society that is around him in order to accomplish the goals of a healthy and productive and even wealthy Jewish community, but at the same time, never losing your value system and always making sure that you keep your covert ideals as the primary objective. And that is, I need to make sure that we have a vibrant Jewish community because we're going to be stuck here for a while, but when it's time to go, we're going to know who we are, and we're going to know what we have to do. The first pasuk, which talks about Yosef marrying Asenath and integrating, is Vayetze Yosef al Eretz Mitzrayim. Yosef goes out to the land of Egypt because he needs to represent himself as one of them. But the second pasuk is Yosef being 30 years old, filled with vigor and strength when he stands in front of Paro, never losing sight of his mission. Vayetze Yosef milifnei Paro, that Yosef leaves Paro's presence. And what is meant by that second statement, Vayetze Yosef, is that he's leaving Paro. He's putting Paro behind him. It's not just that he needs to be Paro's agent, but he is actually separating himself either psychologically or spiritually from Paro, and Vaya'avor b'chol Eretz Mitzrayim, and he's just passing through Egypt, not becoming part of Egypt, but to fulfill his covert objective, which is the primary objective, he needs to put some distance between himself and Paro, at least surreptitiously, and to pass through Egypt, passing himself off as one of them, but knowing that he's not. And that's the duality of the psukim, okay? And when you look at this, the duality of Yosef's identity, you see the same thing when we talk about the two sons that are born to him. The Torah says, Uli Yosef yulad shnei vanim b'terem tavo shanat ha'ra'av. Yosef has two sons before the famine begins. That number one, Asher Yolodo lo Asenath bat Potifera Kohen on. And the reason why the Torah repeats that is because it wants to remind us that the legitimacy that is granted to Yosef is that he's given birth to Egyptian children who are now the grandchildren of the high priest of Egyptian society. So what better yichus do you have? That now that I have children, that now I have a bloodline directly to the high priest of Ra, of the Egyptian gods, then now I've gained full legitimacy, even more so than when I had married Asenath. Now, because now I have a direct bloodline. It's like when Prince Charles married Diana, she only had a little bit of legitimacy. But then when she had Harry and Charles and Harry, no wait, Harry and William, then she had full legitimacy because she gave birth to the royal family bloodline. Okay, that's the idea that is being expressed here. That's why the Torah once again tells us that she is the daughter, Asenath is the daughter of the high priest of Egypt. But the duality kicks in again. That's klape chutz. That's the external Yosef. The internal Yosef is Vayikra Yosef et Shem HaBechor Menashe. Why did Yosef call his firstborn Menashe? Because he's always connected to the Ribono Shel Olam. Hashem has allowed me to forget the pain of my past and to get past it. And why does he call his second son Ephraim? Again, Elokim, because of God, that God has caused me to flourish in this land. Now, it could be that the names Menashe and Ephraim had some significance to Egyptian society, or maybe their names weren't Menashe and Ephraim in Egyptian, maybe they were some other name. But Yosef gives them these names because to the rest of Egyptian society, they are monarchy, they are royalty. But for me, they are reminders that the Ribono Shel Olam is helping guide the future of the Jewish people. And that's the duality that is being described in these verses. I'm married to Asenath, the daughter of the high priest, but my sons are God's children. My sons are given to me by the Ribono Shel Olam, allowing me to continue to thrive in the diaspora and never losing sight of my mission and of my fealty to Hashem. That's how we survive in the diaspora, is that there have been times in Jewish history when both were necessary, when we needed to create an external persona and the internal persona as well. Not all Jews need to do this. If you're going to live in Goshen, then you can live as a Jew and you don't have to have this dual persona, right? So that's why Yosef sets up Goshen eventually and allows his family to settle there. But for the person who's going to be the leader of the Jewish people and needs to be able to have a high-ranking government position, this is the role he needs to play. So that's what I wanted to point out. And I think that that's part of the Chanukah story as well, is that there's that delicate balance. And the Chanukah story reminds us that if a Jew becomes totally Hellenized without remembering his obligation to be loyal to the Ribono Shel Olam, then terrible things can happen and the Jewish people can face complete destruction at the hands of the Greeks. But at the same time, you need the Chashmonai element, which is the undercurrent of the Yosef story as well. Okay, so that's where we'll hold it for today. Let me wish you a happy Chanukah, and Bezrat Hashem, I hope to meet together with you next week. I think it'll still be Chanukah then. Okay, so maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Chanukah. Anyone want to say anything before we call it a day? Chag Sameach as well.
Chag Sameach.
Happy Chanukah.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Take care. Bye-bye.